Good evening to those of you who are just joining us. We'll start we'll give folks another couple of minutes and then we'll get going. Okay, I think we'll get started. Good evening, I'm Catherine Caraway with the City's Department of Planning and Zoning. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's update on the Joint City Schools Facility Investment. I'm sorry, the Joint City School Facility Master Plan process. I'm joined by Erica Gulick and Sophie Humer and Dr. Alicia Hart with Alexandria City Public Schools. Also, Beth Penfield, Kayla Anthony, and Evan Scott with Brailsford and Dunleavy. They are the consultant team working with us on this project. They will introduce themselves as we go through the presentation. A couple of programming notes before we get started, just so everyone is aware, we are recording this meeting and we'll post the video to the project website by the end of this week. We're going to go through the presentation in its entirety and then answer questions at the end. You know, it's possible your question will be answered in future slides, so we'll just wait and hold those to the end. Any questions that aren't answered because we run out of time, we will post the question and answers to the project website. Also keep in mind that we anticipate having at least one more additional online feedback opportunity on draft elements of the plan. We'll keep you informed through the city's and ACPS's e-news notifications. And if you missed our previous engagement activities, you can find those on the project website as well. And that'll be the link we'll show at the last slide of the presentation. Okay, so we wanted to start off tonight with a recap of why the city and ACPS began this joint planning effort. The Joint ACPS Facilities Master Plan, which we'll refer to as the JFMP, was one of 16 recommendations of the Ad Hoc Joint City Schools Facility Investment Task Force established by City Council in 2017, and some of you may have attended those meetings. At a high level, the task force recommended that City Council and School Board take steps to improve project development, explore alternative delivery methods, improve preventative maintenance practices, and promote better cooperation and jointness between the city and school capital programs. In fact, throughout the 34 community meetings that the task force held, and again, some of you may have attended all of those, there were a lot. One of the major themes of discussions was the importance of jointness in city and ACPS service delivery and facility planning. Of the 16 recommendations, Joint Facilities Master Plan was the top priority of both City Council and School Board, as documented during 2 joint work sessions in 2018. The School Board, City Council, and the task force all recognized the magnitude of the need for investment in the city's infrastructure and public facilities across schools, transportation, public safety, human services, affordable housing, and more, all of which compete with each other for scarce funding, especially now in light of this past year. Because the magnitude of the need is so great, efficiency and delivery is essential, and joint planning gives Alexandria the best chance for achieving the most efficient delivery of these needed projects. So with all this in mind, the JFMP will provide guidance and context for future city and ACPS decision-making and planning with respect to public facilities. So Erica, I think I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm just trying to get this slide to change. There we go. And Catherine went through this before. Again, my name is Erica Gulick. I'm the Director of Capital Programs Planning and Design with Alexandria City Public Schools. We really thank you for being here tonight. We know there's a lot going on just with your own families, with the pandemic, a lot of challenges that we've had over the past year. I know on our side, we're really excited to have kids back in the building tomorrow. And so we're certainly prepared for that and glad you're taking the time with us tonight to talk about the Joint Facilities Master Plan. As Catherine mentioned before, you could submit questions. Any questions we can't get to tonight will be featured on a Q&A, our frequently asked question component of our webpage. Please feel free to submit those questions as we're presenting, and we'll be able to go through them at the end. I also just wanted to say, because I know a lot of what has a lot of the discussion for the Joint Facilities Master Plan for other things going on has focused on the idea of co-location, and specifically the co-location of affordable housing on school sites. We wanted to provide an update in case the community here didn't know that on February 4th, the school board voted unanimously to not consider affordable housing on the Mini Howard site. So it will not be included for Mini Howard or for the high school project. And they really cited the shortage of land and the need to be able to grow, not knowing how our enrollments will be in the future within our own already existing ACPS sites. So I just wanted to say that so we could start the meeting so that you all know that at this time, we are not exploring putting affordable housing on any existing ACPS sites. And so with that, tonight we have a great presentation from our consultants, Brailsford and Dunleavy, who have been with us through this process, and a lot of others in the city of Alexandria. They'll be going over an overview. They'll talk through some of the needs assessment, which we've completed in last summer and going into the fall. They'll talk about the roadmap that the Joint Facilities Master Plan will establish and give some examples of city and ACPS facilities, and then talk through the framework and the next steps. And so with that, I believe I will turn it over to Evan with Brailsford and Dunleavy.
I'll start first and then I'll hand it off to Evan. You're all good. Hi, everybody. Thanks again, as Catherine and Erica mentioned, for joining us tonight. My name is Kayla Anthony, and I work for Brailsford and Dunleavy, or B&D, and we've been working with the city and schools to develop the Joint Facilities Master Plan. And really, it's a long-term effort. It's a very broad one that has involved a lot of staff, and we're appreciative of those staff for taking part in the meetings that we've held, as well as the internal stakeholders. And then you, our community members who participated throughout the process in our first town hall, moving into our more digital engagement once COVID hit. So we've tried to summarize our process and our work to date in this presentation, but as they mentioned, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. We'll try to get to them at the end. And if we can't, then we can come back to you at a later point. So let's start with our goals here. Just because this effort is a broad one, one of the things that we wanted to do was identify and focus in on what the three main goals of the JFMP are. And so, as Catherine mentioned, jointness, togetherness, that was at the forefront of our mind when we were identifying these big goals. And so really what we focused on is first trying to pull together all of our needs, all of our resources into one place and look at what our shared opportunities are. And we were doing that so that we could work together to really maximize what we have. And ultimately, our final goal revolved around working together to solve those needs, but also identifying how we can keep working together in the future. So Erica, if you'll move to the next slide, you'll kind of see how these three goals are directly reflected in really the three key elements that are part of the JFMP. And so first you have the needs assessment and the analysis, and that's really where all of those needs and resources get put into one place. Then you'll see the roadmap, which is really more of that new content that we have tonight. And that's all about looking for ways that we can make use of what we already have, giving staff direction on how and what level of effort is required for future planning efforts. And then lastly, our framework, which is really future thinking, and it's all about that future process. If we have a lot of diverse needs, if our projects are complex, how do we really work together to maximize what we have? So yeah, you can go to that next slide. Evan is actually gonna jump in here and talk about the needs assessment for us first, just a little bit of recap on what we did previously.
Thanks, Kayla. Hi, everyone. My name is Evan Scott, and I work with Beth and Kayla at Brailsford and Dunleavy. So as Kayla mentioned, tonight we'll be providing a high-level overview of needs. We did discuss this piece in more depth in our previous engagement in the fall, So if you missed that, it's still available to you. You can view the video and the documents associated on the Joint Facilities Master Plan website on the city page. So to jump into a quick summary of the needs assessment process and findings, you can go to the next slide. There we go. So first, we need to define what we actually mean by needs. So right now, the city and ACPS own more than 60 buildings, and those buildings require constant upkeep and strategy and just general thought. So the most straightforward way that a facility can have a need is from the building simply aging physically. So it requires a refresh of systems, modernization. A good example of this right now are libraries. So the facilities are actually serving the public pretty well, but the facilities are aging and, eventually they will need major investment. A different way that buildings can have needs, they can become functionally obsolete. So, over time, schools have needs for different spaces as technologies change, as enrollment shifts, and those things require investment and change. And then next, populations can grow and shift geographically. So facilities might need to be relocated or expanded to meet the needs and levels of service that residents require. Great example of this, the fire department recently did a location study and found that, due to the location of incidents and calls, they actually need to relocate 4 fire stations in the next several years. And then finally, a city, together with its residents, can define aspirational projects. These may require increasing amenity space per capita or something along those lines. So the project team worked together with city departments and ACPS to collect data, conduct interviews, and that really informed the baseline needs assessment that's included in the JF&P. But it is important to remember that needs can and will change. So, for example, school enrollment trends could shift, additional location studies could be conducted, and we've all lived through COVID-19 this past year, the way that that's disrupted our needs and the way that we need services delivered. So as new data is available, this will continue to be updated. So in addition to determining our needs, we looked at available sites to identify opportunities to help us solve for these new needs or needs that arise in the future. Of the more than 50 sites that the city and schools own today, we found that well over half of them actually provide some type of opportunity to think more creatively or deliver more value on that site. So what we're calling opportunity sites were classified in several different ways. So taking these first two together, sites where the existing use will relocate or new sites will need to be acquired. Again, referencing a fire example here. So as fire stations relocate, that existing site will become vacated, and then there will actually be a new site that's being acquired that will have opportunities associated with it. Opportunity sites also include those where more square footage could be built under existing zoning. So there is a building on site, but it's not maybe as, functional or as maximized as it could be. Also, opportunity sites were sites where a large amount of the site was unused or underutilized. Maybe that's a large parking lot or something to that effect. And then also just a note, historic buildings or those with restrictive deeds were removed from opportunity. So the takeaway here is that Alexandria owns a lot of sites that could be better utilized. And it's really important that we just know what these are for opportunities now and in the future. So in just the next 10 years, there is a major need for investment into 6 elementary schools, both middle schools, Minnie Howard High School campus, 4 fire stations need relocating, an additional fire station needs renovation, the burn building, which is used for training, needs replacement, administrative facilities, including City Hall and the courthouse and the Archives and Records Center require investment, as well as additional police training facilities and community health and wellness assets. And then beyond the first 10 years of this plan, needs just continue to compound. So they do shift a little toward recreation and libraries, but they definitely continue to grow. So in short, despite recent and ongoing investments, there are just a lot of needs. They range very widely across asset types and geography, and the capital budget just cannot support them all in the necessary time frame. So this plan has helped to identify a number of opportunities that optimize existing sites just to more effectively approach the mounting issue here. So I will kick it over to my colleague Kayla to start walking through a few of those opportunities, but I did want to remind you again that the needs list was posted on the website and it can still be viewed there.
Great, thank you, Evan. So let's move into our roadmap here. So if you want to go to the next slide, I'll start talking about it. This is really the meat of our discussion tonight since we had our last engagement meeting, and just kind of a reminder for those of you who might be new to the JFMP, this roadmap is not a set or a list of recommendations, but it's really a set of ideas that are going to help align our assets with the vision of the city. And so the JFMP has been our attempt to solve the biggest needs across the city, really at that portfolio level, but also look at a way to set up a process where staff can continue to update and refine this as things change. We often call this a living document. We use that in several processes, but planning is like that, right? We do things based on what we know today. And so we have organized our roadmap by themes. This is based on that analysis that Evan just talked about at a high level. And really it's all about thinking if there's opportunities to optimize and improve existing sites, like she mentioned, then how do we do that? We should identify a way that we can do that. And so when we were doing our analysis, we noticed a few themes that emerged based on how complex that the planning might be for that site or for that project. And an easy example of that is if you're going to do a renovation on a building, that's a little bit more straightforward than if you're having to plan on searching for a new site or co-locating a school and a recreation center together. There's a lot different process that happens for those more complex projects. And so really applying these themes help us figure out who to involve and when and plan for resources. And the framework really helps organize what these activities are, no matter what the project complexity might be. So on the next slide, you'll see that there's three themes that we actually landed on for this process: invest, optimize, and transform. And we've ordered them in terms of increasing complexity. So you'll kind of understand that in just a moment when we walk through some of those examples. But the first theme, invest, is really all about being good stewards of our buildings, taking care of our existing assets. We know that any building that we own needs some investment over time. The second category, optimize, is all about finding ways to be more efficient or to use our existing sites better. Actually, nearly half of our assets fall into this category. So that's a lot when you think about it. And that means that really there's a lot of ways that we could be better utilizing what we already have. So anytime we start planning to invest in a building, we know that this site could actually do a lot more. And that helps us then know what questions we should be asking. And lastly, our third category, our third theme is transform. And really transform is all about taking optimize to the next level. And so this is thinking about those sites that have an opportunity, not only just to optimize, but really to add more capabilities or add more uses to the site, whether that's being creative with how the building or the site is designed, whether it's looking at co-location, thinking about other creative uses such as underground parking or even partnerships. We know that all of these projects are going to have some commonalities, and these themes aren't perfect, but they're helping us tell the story. They're helping us organize ourselves in this plan. And so let's take a look at some examples of each one. So first up, in the first theme, invest, we have the Kate Waller Barrett Branch Library. This is a historic library. It's had work done over the years. And based on its physical condition, it is going to need a renovation in the intermediate time frame of this plan, which we've identified as approximately the 10 to 20-year range. Based on our conversations with public library staff, we did validate that the library is still a need in this area based on what we know today. And so then we applied our site criteria to look at, well, what is the library site like? And so we observed that it's actually a really small site and there's not a lot of unused site area remaining. You'll see here just a few thousand square feet that could really be added to maximize that site. And it really fits within the context of the area that it's already in. And so the library is efficiently using that existing site. So therefore, part of this plan would recommend an investment in that facility, the library remaining in place, not much opportunity to improve the existing site unless there was some kind of major disruption in how library services are delivered or a preference in how people access the services provided there. So on our next slide, and before we move to our second theme, I wanted to remind you just about this slide that came from one of our previous community meetings. A lot of the urgent needs in this plan relate to the projected enrollment growth that's occurring across the city, and specifically in a lot of those established neighborhoods where housing turnover from an older population to a younger one is bringing more kids into the schools. And so the current capacity is shown in green. The projected enrollment is shown in orange. And so you can see there's a gap between each of those at every school level we have, elementary, middle, and high. But there's also a lot of school sites that fall into our second theme, which is optimize. And that means we have an opportunity to actually better utilize how our sites, our existing school sites, can narrow this capacity gap. And so when we go to rebuild or modernize a school, we can look to add more capacity to that school and align it with the ed specs. So our first example, we have Minnie Howard. Minnie Howard is part of the campus of T.C. Williams High School. I'm sure many of you are aware of the ongoing project that's happening there, but in case you're not, a little bit of background. This school was first built back in the 1950s. It was used as an elementary school, then a middle school, and then I believe it was used as administrative space, and now it's part of that high school network. And so it's seen a lot of change in its day, and as you can imagine, despite a renovation, the spaces don't align with the ed specs, and they also don't provide the capacity that ACPS needs for high school students. And so we also observed that the site is a pretty large site, and ACPS recognized this when they went to plan for the school, and they recognized that it could be optimized by adding more capacity and square footage for high school students. And so that's something that's already underway. It's an urgent project that they have going in the design phase. The next slide shows a view of the current site with a conceptual image at the top that shows the new placement or the placement of the new school. And in addition to optimizing the site by providing more capacity, I just wanted to note here that students are actually going to be able to continue to learn in the existing building, which eliminates that need for a large swing space. And so that's also part of what we're thinking about when we talk about optimizing specifically on the school site, the school sites. Our next two examples that fall under optimize is really all about future thinking. And so beyond the sites that we already have that have schools on them, there's also developer contribution sites that are identified in the small area plans that are developed across the city. And so in Eisenhower East here, you can see that there's actually potential for up to 200,000 square feet of school space in the area, dependent on rezoning. And so we know that as enrollment projections continue to be updated in future years, that's going to help inform what is actually needed and the specific solution for that area. But we want to make sure we keep these sites in the back of our heads. The other one, Potomac Yard, which you'll see on the next slide, there's actually potential for up to 150,000 square foot of school space here. And specifically, you can see the arrow pointing to block 23. That's one that has already been identified as a school site. This one is actually a unique site because ACPS has a unique opportunity to partner with the city or even others like Virginia Tech, where they could be providing for multiple needs in this area. And so when the time does come to build out these sites, thinking of them with that optimization lens is going to make sure that we are efficient with how that site is developed. So our third theme, transform, we're going to take a look at the community shelter site. So a little background here. The Community Shelter and Substance Abuse Center was built a little over 30 years ago, but it does need a major renovation because the building is aging. And similar to a library site, we did validate that this shelter is still a need, but that the location could be examined. And so that means it doesn't necessarily have to be where it is today, but there's nothing driving its relocation. So it could remain in place as well. We applied our site criteria and we observed that the shelter actually sits on a site that still has nearly 40,000 square feet of remaining square feet that could be built. And so the building, it doesn't really fit. If you walked around down in like the Eisenhower East area, you can imagine that like it doesn't fit within the context of the surrounding area when you look at what's been developed nearby and when you think about what's called for in the Eisenhower East Small Area Plan or what is planned in the area. And so if we're going to make an investment in the community shelter in our asset, then let's think of ways that we can improve the efficiency of the site. And so for this site, we actually conducted a test fit and we want to share that with you tonight. But before we do that, a brief note on just what a test fit is. I think sometimes we use these terms and we don't necessarily explain how they help us, but test fits are really fantastic tools. They help staff look more closely at a site and identify what that site's potential could be. It helps us ask a lot of questions and find answers for what the site's topography or zoning or nearby context might be. You're probably familiar with test fits within part of a feasibility study, which are typically more detailed. This is a part of the master plan, so it's an even higher level of test fit. But we just wanted to make sure you recognize that, this isn't something we've determined the program, we've not designed or even laid out the site. We've just looked for ways to better utilize this. And so we think we've got a great opportunity for further planning and discussion on this site. So we'll look at the existing site first. And it's pretty small because we wanted to show some of the existing context of the Eisenhower East area. You can see this site is located where the blue and yellow metro lines actually split. There's also a train line that runs through there, and you're within a 10-minute walk of the Eisenhower metro station. So that red dotted line shows us the site, and just 10 minutes south, you can be at the Eisenhower Avenue metro station. We actually know that WMATA's Virginia headquarters are also being constructed next door. So there's a lot that's happened down here in recent years and more planned. And so we asked ourselves, if there's allowable space remaining on site, how could we use the site more efficiently? And what additional capabilities might this site provide us? And how could we better align it with the small area plan that's been developed? And so on the next slide, you'll see our first idea for a test fit, which really focused on the affordable housing crisis in the area. Housing was identified as an urgent need in our early needs assessment, and it was identified as a need that aligned with the opportunity of this site. And so in the test fit, you can see that we maintain the existing shelter need, but in a new building, and that's shown in kind of the lilac purple color, maybe bluish on your screen. And then we've co-located housing and a shelter on the same site. And so the housing component is identified by a burgundy purple color. And so there could be design in terms of how this actually worked on the site, but based on the square footage allowed, you could actually rezone the site to align with the small area plan, get up to 200 feet of building height in the area, which is at minimum, they require 100 feet in redeveloping the site in this area. But the result is really a transformation of the site, and you could have mixed use that provides multifamily and commercial units with underground parking and still maintain your existing shelter capacity that would add 100 units of housing to the city. There's actually some precedent for this type of co-location occurring. If you're thinking, well, how do you put a shelter and housing on one site? And so there's actually one that just happened in Alexandria that's on the next slide. This was formerly the Carpenter Shelter. And you can see here that the development, it was a redeveloped site that includes a 60-bed shelter, some low rent apartments, as well as some permanent supportive housing. And so this was really one of our inspiration for thinking about how we might rethink the community shelter site. Let's look at our next test fit. This is our second one that we did for this site. And this really takes our idea a little bit further. One of the things we learned was that the site could actually, because it could accommodate up to 200 feet of building height, which we didn't quite hit in that last one, and the shelter could be relocated to a surplus site, we wanted to see how we might actually maximize the site. And so if we relocated the shelter to a site in the future that is vacated by another need, that site could actually accommodate up to 300,000 square feet of multifamily and commercial units, and that includes underground parking. So you actually have the ability to get even closer to 160 housing units on this site. And this is using some high-level math. We've assumed a standard unit mix that could certainly be changed in any kind of market sounding and analysis that would have to be done for a project like this. But just wanted to note that there's more that could be done with the site than if the shelter were relocated to a new place. I do want to take time to note before we go to the next, you can stay on this slide, that's fine. I just want to take time to note that this is not an approved project. It's not a planned project. Part of what we were doing is testing options, testing some scenarios that might help us think about how we utilize our sites. So I just wanted to make that note here. Let's go to the, yep. So I'm about to stop talking, which I'm sure is exciting because I've done a good amount of it here, but that was the bulk of what we wanted to talk about tonight. I think we want to wrap up here before I hand it over to Beth, because if the test fits aren't projects, right? If they're not what we've approved, if they're not what we've planned or funded, then what do we do with these from here, right? And so we put this graphic together just to help describe how the JFMP fits into like the broader project life cycle, which Beth is going to describe. But when we started the JFMP, that's when we really took time to confirm what the vision and priorities of the city and schools were. And we wanted to make sure this plan reflects those values. And so that's why in our first town hall, we asked you to confirm what our guiding principles for this process were. And then that allowed us in the JFMP and the master planning effort to really ask as many questions as we could, better understand our needs and resources, and then identify what some creative ideas and opportunities might be. And so that's the stage in the process we're at, where you, the community, really helped us understand what your priorities are, and you've provided feedback on our ideas. But the JFMP is really just the beginning of a planning process. And so I'm going to let Beth talk about how we think about moving some of these ideas and initiatives further.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so again, we oriented you all to the three key elements: the needs assessment, the roadmap, and now the framework, which is where really we take those ideas from the roadmap and we put them into motion. And the framework is the tool by which we will do so. Go to the next one. It's a very dynamic tool. It's got lots of different faces to it. It's tended to help communicate to all sorts of stakeholders, internal, external, the community, and really help guide that process and bring clarity to the decision-making process. These are just a few snapshots here. I know that you can't read them, but I hopefully you can see that there is flow to them. So what we do is we take the processes across planning, design, and construction. Kayla used the word project life cycle. How do we break those down So they can be the activities associated with each of the different steps and phases along the way can be well understood by all. We talked a lot about a lot of different complex projects. This really helps external stakeholders like yourselves navigate that complex planning process. We go through design, again, planning, design, and construction, and where those ideas from the roadmap, because we need to start somewhere, really start to materialize. It's ambitious, but it lets us really help empower staff, bring great ideas to the table, along with being disciplined. And ultimately, we're working towards, and if you can see it at the bottom, it looks kind of like a heartbeat. And that's what we call it, our project heartbeat. That really is that set of control points that helps us navigate the path decisions are making along the way from these projects. And overall, it's that goal to be transparent and really help make sure people understand the decision-making process, as well as the points of which you all can get engaged in the future. And we're very excited and hopeful that you'll do that with us. You can go to the next. We talked about our guiding principles, because overall, what are our values? What does anyone who's involved in any part of a project need to know? And if we could all print this off and have it on our cubicles or office walls, anyone who touches one of the Alexandria projects should walk away knowing this. You know, our ultimate goals being one community and one portfolio, are that the assets need to reflect our city values and our commitment to equity. Thinking about how we optimally use our existing resources, and I hope you saw that today through the roadmap ideas that we're bringing to the table. And looking at comprehensive, cohesive solutions that provide lasting value, trying to get away from band-aiding and really having impactful projects. And overall, our benchmark is excellent in project delivery and asset management. I guess, or as always happens when you're talking fast, but one thing I do want to mention is that the framework piece, it's going to have components, and Kayla, you can click backwards. It's going to have components that are staff facing, but also public facing. And one piece of that is interfacing with the staff who are working on a project management standards at the same time. So there's a really lot of great movement going on to bring these projects online. So I guess we'll end with that.
Okay, Sophie, do we have questions from the attendees?
Yes. The
Okay.
first question, is there a list you can share of the ownership of the 60 facilities and buildings? Which are city, which are schools, and which are both?
Yeah, we can provide that. I mean, generally, and Erica, you weigh in on this, but generally the city owns all the sites, but schools maintain control of what happens on their sites. But we do have, I believe we do have an ownership list that we can provide. Erica, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't have anything to add. I think there are maybe like 2 or 3 that list the school board as the actual owner. For example, Ferdinand Day, I believe, was purchased by the school board and is owned by the school board. But in general, the city of Alexandria owns all of them. We all kind of make collaborative decisions on what happens with our sites. And there are some where we even share with recreation parks and cultural activities and things like that. But yes, we can go through and get that list.
Okay, second question, who makes the final JFMP decisions?
So this whole process was a priority of both the school board and city council. They will ultimately endorse it or not. And then, you know, or the various city and ACPS staff will implement it. And, you know, then it's a 30-year plan. So it's a long-term plan. And also I wanted, and I'm sorry if somebody already mentioned this, I wanted to reiterate that this is a living process, living document, however you want to describe it. So as needs change, as new information comes forward, this will be updated to reflect that. It's not written in stone because we all know how quickly things can change. So I just wanted to reiterate that. So and anybody else, please jump in. I did want to also say that along with a recording of this this video, we will post this presentation to the project website. So you'll have that available as well. Are there any other questions?
Yes.
Did we link, maybe we link the website too, just so people have it in the chat. I can also do that.
I don't know if they have access to that.
Ah, then write it down from your screen right now. Though I'm sure all of you have it bookmarked on your favorites. We appreciate it.
All right, another question. Are public-private partnerships part of this plan?
So I'll start, and then if somebody wants to chime in, you can. So I think to answer that question, the first thing is when we think back to our themes as part of the roadmap, the theme transform is really what brings in some of those opportunities for whether it's monetization of a site, whether it's co-locating distinct uses on a site, or if there's some kind of potential for public-private partnership. And so when you saw the community shelter, I think that's a great example of one that would be ripe for a public-private partnership. We have not specifically defined what that project would look like. So the exact unit mix, what the market calls for specifically for that area, and if it would be, X% affordable versus market rate. There's a lot of specific planning that would have to occur for an actual public-private partnership, but we have identified sites that could be transformed, and a lot of those lend themselves to public-private partnerships.
And I'll say from the framework's perspective, because I'm a consultant, we like to make up words, right? We'll call it the projectization process. And along that path, the projects in those phases have the different strategies and activities you conduct to further define your project. And part of that definition process is the delivery strategy. And so they'll be at a point at time where the project manager, the sponsor, and all the stakeholders will huddle together to evaluate what is the most appropriate way to deliver this project. And that will be where the framework includes those cues about those evaluation points to see if that delivery method of public-private partnership is the right method for that project. Though, of course, public-private partnerships, each one they like to say are very unique. And so it's tempting to apply a framework to evaluate those unique opportunities. I see, because I can just see the questions. Did we answer? I think we did, but that we will have a copy and a recording of this presentation posted for that. I'll take the easy question.
Okay, so any more questions from the community? Just to remind you again, we are going to be posting the overall just high level themes that we discussed tonight so the needs assessment is posted on the project website right now, and we will be adding the high level themes to each one of those probably by next Monday at the latest. So you can take a look at those at a high level, and we will, as I said, we will be posting the video, the presentation, and we'll get a list of ownership of the sites for you. Guys, am I missing anything?
No, I had one more question come in though, before we wrap up. And the question is, I could just go, how are capacity concerns being addressed in the short term? I can speak from the school side and say that capacity concerns at the school level is something we try to address with each project. So right now we have two major projects going on, the Douglas MacArthur project as well as the high school project, which will both add capacity for student seats. And I think outside of that, we try to address as much as we can the school capacity needs through at the secondary level, looking at our scheduling, making sure that we're being as efficient as possible with our needs. And I think one thing that I know our superintendent has brought up, but just thinking about how the last year of learning has impacted the way our students receive their education, and just thinking about the potential options that this might open up in the future, to see if virtual learning maybe for some students could continue to be a part of that as well. Certainly not a capacity solution, but just another option to explore. So we continue to look at our capacity and our enrollment from the school perspective, I can say at least, and are making sure that school by school we're prepared each year for the amount of students that we have coming in. So that's what I'll say on schools, but I don't know if you want to address some of the city capacity needs.
I mean, I can just add to that. I think it seems like the question there was directed at schools, but we can speak to some of the broader needs as well. One of the other major needs in the urgent timeframe of this plan is with fire stations, and specifically with looking at how to relocate a few of those fire stations based on the fire department did a location study. And so looking at how they better serve based on the timing it takes to respond to where incident demand is located and where it's projected to be. And so that's another major piece in the first timeframe of this plan, is identifying those sites and constructing fire stations that respond to that. And some of that's then going to leave behind where an existing fire station was. That's also part of this plan, is to think about what happens to a site once it's vacated. And a lot of those fire station sites are really small, but that's one that we're also considering for other city capacity needs.
Okay. I'll give everybody another second or two. Oh, there's another question. Let's see. Oh, it was a thank you. All right. Well, anytime anyone in the community has a question, please feel free to contact me, Catherine Caraway, or Erica Gulick. Our contact information is posted on the project webpage. So we are happy to answer questions and talk about this anytime. Guys, have I hit on all the?
So just to say thank you for everyone for coming out tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a busy week. You would think with all, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you, everybody. I will be at Douglas MacArthur bright and early. If anybody will be there, I will see you.
Yeah, good luck to everybody going back to school.
Okay, have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, thank you.